had my invitation as well to the one that's already been extended. Please do remain for our fellowship in the building to your left, right after our assembly this morning. The best buffet you'll find in town. If you go anywhere else, you'll have nowhere near as many choices of things to dine exquisitely on, not the least of which is the desserts. It's always exciting to see the array. And also, that's where Charlotte tries out her new recipe. And if it goes well with you guys, then she serves it at home. So you're kind of a test kitchen. But also, especially if you're born or your anniversary is in the month of January, we want to celebrate that as well. Great time of, and if you went anywhere else, there's not a group of people that is greater to dine with than those that will be there. So please, avail yourself. If you're visiting, we would love to have you join us. If you didn't bring anything, there's always food and to spare. So do not let that stand in the way, because that's the purpose of it, is to honor you. Glad you're here this morning. I want to talk about storms. Storms are coming. And I'm not a weatherman, but that's always the case. And especially if you're like me, when we get to January, you wonder over these next 7 or 8 weeks how often it's going to ice, because we normally get that in January and or February, sometimes into March. And I think sometimes, guys, we look at storms, or we look at what we might be challenges in weather as almost parenthetic. You know, we're living our lives, we're doing what we want to do, and then these things kind of get in the way, and we have to push things aside. It's kind of like getting snowed in. You have to, you can't go to work, you can't do all the things that you're normally trying to do, and this weather has, it's put a negative into our lives, and I want us to try to consider that there's a different way of looking at that it's not, we don't endure what you see in that picture to get to this. It's not what it's about. It's not enduring one thing so that we can get back to what was there before. What I want you to understand is that these two aspects of weather are not competitive. It's not one is good and the other is bad, or one is preferable and one is not. I want you to understand that they're complementary. They're designed by God to complement one another and also to complement us. Now, we have certain biases. I think some of us might say we prefer warmth to cold, or we prefer sun to rain. But we understand that to live, we're dependent on both of those equally. Without rain, there are no crops. Without sun, there are no crops. We don't live. So they're not competitive, although we tend to look at them that way. And since storms are always coming, and you're headed for another storm in your life, speaking metaphorically, you're going to face adversity. And it's probably going to be relatively soon to one degree or another. If you view life as trying to escape storms, then you're missing out on what God is trying to teach us through not only times of peace, of the boat just kind of sitting on the calm lake, but what he's trying to teach us in the powerful expression of storms. And he created both of them. And it's something that he wants us to see as complementary to one another. Maddie Stepanek has written, we all have life storms. When we get through the rough times and we recover from them, we should celebrate that we got through it. No matter how bad it may seem, there's always something beautiful that you can find. Epictetus once wrote, the greater the difficulty, the more glory in surmounting it. Skillful pilots gain their reputation from storms and tempests. That's true of any pilot. A pilot of aircraft, when they make it through challenges, when they make it through engine failure, or all the things that can happen, that's when they establish themselves, particularly as a good or desirable pilot. it. What he was saying, it's the storms that separate those who are skillful from the also-ran, if you would. Frederick Douglass wrote, "It is not light that we need, but fire. It's not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. We need them." And to not be outdone, a local guy has written, "In peace a ship drifts. In storm it is propelled forward with all the energy nature can muster. Storms are not what we endure as if they detour from our purpose. Storms are what propel us towards our future." If you think about it, without winds and waves, there's no movement. Winds and waves create storms. Storms create tremendous movement. And if our goal is movement, then we desire those things. We do not endure storms to achieve the safe harbor. We embrace storms to achieve Christ-likeness. As much as we embrace peace in our lives, we should also learn to embrace storms. First, because we know they're going to happen. You have storms. I have storms. You may be in the midst of a tempest right now. And to the glory of God, if you learn to embrace that for what it brings to you, not the least of which is tremendous movement, not the least of which is development. Because our goal is to become Christ-like, and the winds and the waves compel us in that direction if we seek that. Matthew chapter 8, passage you know very well. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. Behold, there was a great storm in the sea, so that the boat was covered with the waves. And he himself was asleep. And they came to him and woke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you timid, you men of little faith?" Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and it became perfectly calm. And the men marveled, saying, "What kind of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" Now, you and I both know that winds and seas don't have ears. They don't have brains. They are forces of nature which God created, but they listen to him. They obey him. Success in the storm is not about the storm. It's not about being overtaken by the sea. And guys, when the waves are overtaking the boat, that's a serious storm. And here are men handpicked by God through Christ in this storm who resist what the storm is doing. Jesus submits to it. It's not about being overtaken by the sea. It's not being pushed in a hurricane. It's not devastation. It propels us if we understand. The storm that Jesus was enduring asleep was sent by God. It's not about your abilities as a mariner. It's not about your ability with a ship. It's not about how strong you are, how powerful you are. It's not how motivated you are. It's not about any of that. It's not about your abilities as a problem solver when storms come. It's not about your abilities to offer solace in times of grief. It's not your ability to show your incredible strength by overcoming, often by simply denying that I'm even in a storm. It's not about any of that. It's who's in your boat. He is the only one that storms listen to. He's the only one that can impact storms themselves. When storms come, we cry out, we turn to a lot of different things. But if Christ is in your boat, and you see, that's what these men should have shared. Guys, we're fine. God's not going to let his son perish. We're with him. We're where we need to be. Now, I'm not criticizing them, because if I were in the boat, I would have been doing the same thing. Lord, we're about to waves are taking us over. How can you sleep? Had they known him, had they known what it really meant to be in the boat with Jesus, they would have said, guys, we're fine. Had they truly known Jesus, they would say, why don't we take a nap? Because he is. I don't fault them for not understanding, but Jesus did. I don't fault them because I can relate to them. But Jesus said, you timid man, what are you afraid of? And then he stood up and spoke. And the winds quit and the waves quit. Now they're afraid of him. Who is this? If the winds and the waves listen to him. That's the point. So the question is not who's around you. The question is not how good you are, how strong you are, how capable you are. It's about who's in your boat. Because if Jesus is in the boat, it's going to be okay. Our response often is, we need one another. But I want you to consider that a boat filled with the best men on the face of the earth, hand-chosen by the Son of God himself, were not adequate to the storm. They turned to one another in panic. They didn't turn to one another for help because there is no help from them. They weren't adequate. This boat full of the best men were not adequate to the storm. The greatest amalgamation of the greatest that humanity has to offer will result in drowning. Without Jesus in the boat, it doesn't matter who's in the boat. They're lost. They're going to die. You put the greatest minds, you can put the greatest entrepreneurs, you can put the greatest caring, nurturing, put whoever you want in the boat. Handpick them. Brothers and sisters, we don't need one another. We need Jesus, and now we're able to turn to one another. Make sure that Jesus is in your boat, and then surround yourself with the greatest disciples that you can. Not that they may help save you, but that you may all enjoy his rescue together. Before we need one another, we must make sure Jesus is in the boat. Or put it another way, we're in his boat with him. Because all of the folks in this room cannot save you. All together they cannot save you. The 12 could not save you. Jesus in the boat is salvation. We don't turn to one another for that. We turn to one another to celebrate salvation and the rescue that we all receive together in Christ Jesus. Now, an important aspect of this is we don't judge one another's storms. And what I mean by that is we don't judge people in their storm. Because we don't know what type of storm they're going through. We don't know the severity of the storm. We don't know the storm's capacity. Because your loss is not like my loss. Your calamity is not like my calamity. They may be similar in structure, but the way it affects you and the way it affects me is very, very different. It's just like spiritual gifts. It's like talents. It's like personalities. We don't criticize one another's storms. We encourage one another. Make sure you're in the boat of Jesus. And it will get in the boat with both of you. But if Jesus is in the boat, you're good. And I'm not here to judge you, because I'm in the same boat that you are. And without Jesus in it, guys, it's like if you and I decide that we're going to jump the Grand Canyon. And we get on the west bank, and we both take off. And we give ourselves a 25-foot, 30-foot, whatever, head start. We get up to our highest speed. and we jump out, and you're in better shape than I am, you jump out 5 feet further than I do. Will you make fun of me as we both plummet to the rocks? Ha ha ha, made it fun. Doesn't matter. No matter how far you can jump. We're both dead. And it matters not who made it further. We don't judge one another's storm. We invite folks into the boat of Jesus. And then the storm has a purpose. Because then it's developed. You don't know the complexity of the storm. Sometimes there's storms within the storm. Sometimes all I can do is stand outside your storm and lament for you. But I don't judge you. Because your storms affect you in a different way than my storms affect me. Just like the threshold of pain, there's a threshold of endurance. Some people are more caring and more sensitive, and their threshold is lesser because they carry other people's storms. So it doesn't take as much storm to get them to feel deeply because they're very empathic. Some people are not. They're very stoic. But it doesn't matter. A storm is a storm. You don't judge. Well, you should be stronger. You should have endured this. You should have overcome this. Look at me. No. You need to stay in the boat. If you're leaving the boat, you need to get back in the boat where we're all humming around Jesus. Because without him, this boat is sinking and we are all dying. Regardless of the difference in our capabilities to handle pain, regardless of our abilities to endure suffering. See, I've choked myself up. It'll come back. I don't know your threshold of endurance, and you don't know mine. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long you endure, or how long I can endure. The only thing that matters, we're in the boat with Jesus. And he's at total peace, because he's in total control. You've never known my endurance to this type of storm. Some storms I can handle relatively well. Some storms really challenge me to the core, and yours are different. When I was about 10 years old, 11 years old, my best friend living in Houston, Pasadena, south side of Houston. My best friend was a guy by the name of Randy Nutt. Now, when I tell you what's going to happen, I want you to understand about 4 months after what I'm going to tell you took place, he died. Randy and I had decided we were getting old and that Halloween was not going to be available to us much longer. So we decided we were going to make the best of this. He took a pillowcase and I took a grocery bag, and we decided we were going to try to fill those things one night. We started almost when school let out. We were meeting people coming home from work. We were the kids that you hate on Halloween because they come too early and they stay too late. It was way past dark, and we had worked hard. Now, I want to tell you about Randy. He was such a salesperson. Trick or treat. Don't you boys getting a little old for this? It's really hard being a cop. It's really hard being a foster child. Was he? No. They didn't know that. Legally, he didn't say, I'm a foster child. He just said, it's really hard being a foster child. We got bonus candy. We got money. We had people, I'm so sorry. Here, take as much as you want. I've got it, you know. He was good. And by the end of the night, I was coming to tears because of his calamity that never existed. We parted ways, and it's way after dark. We were waking people up. They were dumping the bowl, get rid of the rest of it. It was about a half a block from my house, and a car pulled up beside me. Guy rolled the window down, and he was asking me directions. Can you tell me how to get so-and-so, so-and-so? And I was telling him, and he got out of the car, and he said, now, and he started pointing, and then he ran over and grabbed my bag of candy, pushed me down, jumped back in the car, and they took off. I was devastated. I was crying. All that investment, all those lies, all that work. And I had done all this work, and then these two high school kids come along and in a matter of seconds destroy all of that. Why do you think I still remember that? But because it was a calamity the likes of which, in that kind of a situation, I had never experienced. So I go home with nothing to show for a full day's work. And my dad asked, why are you crying? He said, my candy was stolen. Now you got to understand, my dad came from the Depression. Having candy, period, was just not part of it. We never had it around the house. I mean, it was, you were lucky to, my grandfather would come to my father with 5.22 shells and say, son, we need some squirrels or rabbits for food. And 5 shells was all he could afford. And my dad was a crack shot, because you have to be if you're hunting and you're going out in the snow and you need 5 squirrels or 5 rabbits. My dad hated it when company came because he got more shells. And he had to go out and get more game. My dad was in the Army before he ever had a meal prepared for him outside of the home. He lived a very tough life. So to him, my loss of candy was superfluous and stupid. And his response was, if it means that much, we can go buy you some candy, because you shouldn't need candy in the first place. And to have a bag of it is that's just over the top of anti what it means to have lived in the Depression when we live off what we need, et cetera. I mean, it was just superfluous. But my brother ran up to the room that we shared, threw myself on the bed, and I was just bawling. What's wrong, Steve? I worked so hard, I got all that candy, and it was just right down the street. It got stolen. Who stole it? I don't know who they were. Were they in a car? Yeah. What kind of car? What did they look like? And from all of that, he ascertained who it was. And the next day at South Houston High School, he took each of them individually and said, you're going to give the candy back, replace anything that you've taken, or I'm going to slobber knock beat the sense out of you. And you're going to take it back to my brother, and you're going to apologize to him. And they came back, apologized to me, they replaced the candy. You see, looking back at a 10-year-old, do you judge him for that being a calamity? Do you, like my dad, it's just candy, son, because I've lived in the Depression? Or do you, like my brother, I don't care about the candy, I care about somebody harming my brother. And I'm going to take that, I'm going to become your rescuer. Guys, right now, if I were to go collecting candy and people say, aren't you a little old for this? And I would learn how to say, it's hard being a foster child. And if somebody stole the candy, it wouldn't be a big deal, because my capacity now is different. My storms are different. But I don't judge, and I hope you don't judge that 10-year-old for being overwhelmed by that, because that was his capacity. That was his ability. And that's what the calamity was. And that's why we don't judge each other's storms. Because our thresholds are different, our tolerances are different, our sensitivities are different, and they're different, even inside of us, they're different in different areas. There is no competition because there is only one storm breaker. And the rest of us are either with the storm breaker or we get broken by the storm. It has nothing to do with what we bring to the game. It has nothing to do with our abilities or our skills or anything that we've learned. It has everything to do with getting close to the one who's asleep in the midst of the storm, who is the only one storms listen to. And they listen seriously to what he has to say. See the purpose of storms. Hebrews 2:18. For since himself was tempted in that which he suffered, he is able to come to the aid of those who are tempted. And we can add the word tried, because they go hand in hand. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through the things which he suffered. I don't think we would structure the sentence the same way. I would think we would say through what he suffered, he learned endurance. He learned patience. He learned compassion. And certainly he learned all those things. Scripture said he learned obedience. Because there's a progression. And when you get down to it, guys, all we have is promises from God. That's all we have. And so what happens in suffering, that leads to a reflection on the promises. Now, wait a minute, I'm suffering. However, he's promised, I'll never give you more than you can endure without giving you a way out. So I'm good to go. I don't understand how this is going to work out. And it feels like it's going to kill me. But I've got this promise that I'm never going to let that happen. As long as you're in the boat, nobody dies here. Nobody is overwhelmed. That's where the faith accepts the promises. That's where the faith kicks in. He promised this is going to work out. He promised this is going to happen. And that's when the obedience. Therefore, I'm going to do what he said do. I'm going to endure what he said endure. Because he's promised he's not going to overwhelm me. He promised he will deliver me. He promised. Brothers and sisters, that's all we have. When we're in the boat and the storms are overwhelming us and they're filling up the boat and it's too far to row back to shore, the only thing we have is the promise of salvation, the promise of rescue. And in their case, it was embodied in the form of Jesus, just like he is with you. And that leads to rescue. And what happened? They hadn't learned the promises. They didn't trust in the promises. But they got rescued anyway. Because when Jesus is in the boat, there cannot be negative outcome. That's why peace and storms are not competitive. They are complementary. No temptation has overtaken you, but such is common to man. And God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, that you may be able to endure. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? So tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword, name it. What can separate us from the love of Christ? The only thing that can is I get out of the boat. Just as it is written, for thy sake we are being put to death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. But in all things we are overwhelmingly conquered through him who loved us. In all things, in peace, in storms, and in the midst of the storm, to to be reminded of the promises of God. That's what the others in the boat are for. They're not there for rescue. We don't turn to one another except to be reminded to one another to turn back to Him and His promises. And there, in the midst of the storm, find peace. Peace to the extent that you can take a nap. Because it's so okay. You can rest in the midst of the storm. Brothers and sisters, storms are coming. You may be in the midst of one right now. But I've got good news for you. God uses storms to propel us to the likeness of His Son. To form us to the point. And brothers and sisters, may there come enough storms in our lives that we learn to sleep in the boat while the waves are coming over, because we believe so much in His promises. Are you in storms right now? God bless you. Are you in storms right now? Don't be praying for peace. Pray for the propulsion to become like His. Pray that in the midst of this storm, and God, bring into my life whatever storms I need to be formed into the likeness of your Son. But my goal is to trust in your promises so much that I can sleep in the midst of the storm. I can always be peace. Let come what may. Jesus is in the boat. Are you in storms? Are you separated from Christ? Are you fearful? Afraid of being overwhelmed, being pushed beyond your ability? Get back in the boat. Huddle up to Him and rest. Can we help you in your storm? Let's talk. Let's share. Surround yourself with the folks in this room. Not as salvation, but as I remember His promises. Trust Him. Jesus is in the boat. We're okay. Can we help you? Come as we stand and sing.